Hello, and welcome to MyCounselor.Online. I'm your host, Brittany East, and joining me today as the featured counselor is Ryenn Yarbrough. Ryenn, we are so grateful that you're joining us today to dive into a topic that is kind of uncomfortable, but definitely needed. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Do you mind introducing yourself? Maybe share a little bit about yourself for those viewers who may not know you yet?
Yeah, sure. Like you said, my name's Ryenn. I have been at MyCounselor.Online for 2 years. I knew after grad school that I really wanted to be a part of an organization with Christian values, where I got to see clients with the same values and wanted to grow their relationship with God, but then also develop their mental health and have that be a priority too. And I just love just getting to blend those together and having some really cool conversations around that. Yeah, and I really enjoy sex therapy and all things sex. And so MCO just has awesome trainings and with that. And so I just get to just nerd out all the time with trainings and with conversations and meeting people where they're at here. So love what I do.
That's awesome. We're really grateful to have you as part of MCO. So your article is titled 4 Things You Should Tell Your Daughter About the Female Body. So what inspired you to write this article?
Yeah, so I've had several clients just throughout my years here who grew up in purity culture. And as they're working through, their own trauma, and we're having conversations about, as they're kind of figuring out what that means for them and the steps they want to take, as they start to look at themselves as God's beautiful creation and undoing some of that shame and that aloneness, and that they're 99% of the time, usually it comes up I'm really worried about having those conversations with my daughter or my future kids or my nieces or nephews, or when people have questions about that, I don't want to shame them or have them be stuck in the same cycle that I'm feeling like I'm in. So this just felt okay, what is the simplest 4 steps that we could just have in our back pocket to take into maybe some of these conversations that are a little nerve-wracking as you prepare to be a parent or as a have a teenagers around or whatever.
Absolutely. So was your perspective, I guess, because I read the article and my immediate perspective was oh, I think this is written for moms, but did you have a wider audience in mind when you wrote the article?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about, you usually picture mom having that conversation with daughter, right? That's a very traditional sense of that. So I do think probably writing it, I had that in my head. But I also think it's for anybody who's, gonna have those conversations in the future, who maybe have already had those conversations and now as a grandparent or, something like that. But even having those conversations with your younger self, man, what would have been for my 10-year-old or my 11-year-old or my 16-year-old to have learned this at that age instead of at 30 or 40 or 60 or whatever I'm learning these things now.
No, that totally makes sense. So at what age, not the, adult's age, but at what age for the daughter do you think they should be around when these conversations start?
Yeah, I mean, kids start asking questions where do babies come from so early, right?
Yes, they do.
So I mean, I think developmentally, wherever your kid's at, can be as simple as having a conversation about, you're a girl, you have these parts, and your brother's a boy and he has those parts, or dad has these parts, I have these parts, what it's having this conversation at whatever developmental stage is important, and where that curiosity starts, or if there's something that happened in the family, okay, maybe we need to talk about that. I was planning on having this conversation later, but because of this situation or something that we watched on accident, or that something came up or a friend had mentioned, okay, well, maybe we should start that conversation now and start, what questions do you have?
So one of the things you kind of broke down in your article is like the 4 parts of the menstrual cycle, which I know we've done a whole another article video about it, which I love. I loved talking to you about that because you really dived deep into it. This is like an overview.
Yeah.
But why do you think it's important for young girls to understand that there are even 4 parts to their menstrual cycle? I thought it was curious that you like included that breakdown because I was like, I was thinking to myself, how you mentioned like, I wonder how that would have changed for myself if I knew that going through
Yeah.
puberty that there was 4 parts. But yeah, I was curious why you thought it was important to like for a young girl to know those 4 parts.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like personally, that was the same realization I had was like, oh my gosh, like I think when I learned that someone was just like, oh, well, like you have your period. And that's the cycle is like this, like certain, like these like very short amount of time during this month, you're gonna like bleed and that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like so much more information around of like what our bodies are doing during that entire cycle. And I remember learning that for the first time, you're like, oh my gosh, like that is so amazing to know, like, oh yeah, I'm probably gonna need to eat more calories the week before my period because my body is craving more nutrition and protein and things like that. Or chocolate, or whatever you're having those cravings before your period starts. But like that was normal and that's like like
Mhm.
like how our body's made, and that was so
Yeah.
different. And it wasn't just some like thing that oh, gotta get her a box of chocolates when she's like about to have her period, right? Like that was like no, our body wants that caffeine or whatever it is that we're having, and that there's like just another part of um
Like
what our body.
empowerment through knowledge type
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, and as I was reading it too, at least I felt like when I was, we had our like, I think I had a mom who was like very open. I was totally aware what was going on, but I still felt a lot of like shame and embarrassment over it. So I was curious, like as a parent or, a mentor, someone like, how do you feel like could be a way to respond or support, like if peers like at school are making our daughters feel embarrassed or ashamed about like when they start their period?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like it's such a real thing, right? Like, I mean, I think you're saying like, yeah, that was your experience. I've had those experiences. Like, I mean, I think they're written in culture and literature about like, oh, like you wore white pants to school and it was the day that your period started. Like, oh, the horror, right? Like this like the most embarrassing thing that could ever happen. So just like the realness and like the normalcy about this is something that like, yeah, we have to like figure out how to manage and deal with. And but then also like building up like that this is how God our creator created our bodies, and it's like such a beautiful thing, and like helps us to conceive children one day, and is yeah, just how God has created us to be. I had my dad actually was the one who came up to me when I was younger. I think I mentioned this maybe in our last
Yeah.
video, but he was like, "Don't ever be ashamed to go down that aisle at the store," because he had like went and bought something for me, and all the women just like ran away when they saw a man walking down that aisle. And so yeah, I think just just having that continued like this is normal, like this is what our bodies are supposed to be doing, this is healthy,
Mhm.
this is healthy that you're starting your period and having your period monthly, and having this cycle that you're learning about and developing is good. And yeah.
And then kind of jumping off that, you talk about even like the dad being like, I have to buy this. Other women makes them feel more embarrassed, maybe even than the dad. But because you did mention a little bit about like blood catching devices, and I was curious. And this, I mean, honestly, I thought this question just because my mom had an issue with like internal devices. So I was curious, like, what's the best way to introduce internal blood catching devices, like a tampon, like a cup, if like the mom or whoever the girl is close to is uncomfortable or just like has no experience using them? Like, how can you guide? I guess I'm like, I don't know if you have any input, but like how to guide a daughter to use something that you're like, I don't even know.
I used this before, like, yeah, they didn't have this when I was a kid, right? Like, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think knowing your options as you're starting to like start your period and things like that is such a helpful thing. Like knowing, oh, like if a pad feels uncomfortable, like there are other options out there. I could, I don't, really environmentally friendly and want to like use things that you can like wash and reuse, like that might be something mom's like, oh, I don't know, like I've never done that before, like just so many things out there, right, that can be helpful and different, and our bodies are so different. But as a mom specifically who like, I mean, you at that point, mom's probably got like her system down, like she's got her like, oh, these are my like 3 products that I get every month, and I know how to go. And so really like just learning, like going together and sitting like, hey, with the like laptop on your laps and like, okay, like let's research some
Mm,
things that we might want to learn more about. Is there the instructions on a tampon box, can just be as simple as that. Like, how can we read this together,
mm,
and help you feel like confident to try something different, um, and employ other women in your life if you have aunts or sisters or um, your grandmothers or friends that oh, well, I've been using the Diva Cup for years, and I feel more comfortable. Maybe we could have a conversation and talk
mm.
about that all together, and just researching that together, like how um like fruitful and fun that would be, just to like have that conversation with your mom of like learning together, like, oh, I don't know, I've never used that before, we'll have to figure it out together, like.
No, that is true. And then something also that was the article was like you had, very like diagrams breaking down the parts of the vagina. I was curious. I mean, I guess I did like one, like, why do you think it's important for a young girl to even understand like the different parts of her vagina, like labia versus clitoris versus opening, urethra, all those things? And then two, like, what would be an age that you kind of start even labeling beyond like, well, this is a vagina, this is a penis, but like, is there an age in mind you think for like breaking down even the anatomy further?
Yeah. So first question, why I think it's important. I think especially as women, boys are luckier in a sense, and their genitalia is on the outside of their body, and like they know where their pee comes out of, and like can easily name where their parts are, right? And as a
Yes.
female, I think, I mean, have to maybe get a mirror out and like set up a
Yeah.
light and like look at your diagram and try to like
Yeah.
find things. So just a little bit more uh time consuming maybe to like spend figuring out your body, but I really think it's just empowering um
Mm,
to know those things, and as you're even a small kid figuring like things out, um okay, well, okay, there's stuff down there, right? Like there's things down, where does my pee come out of? Like I remember being
yeah.
curious about that as like a
Yeah. Yeah.
small child, and like, is there like a plug that like unplugs and then plugs back? Like, and so like just how like helpful that is to, I
Yeah.
can visually see my eyes blink, and like that's how my eyes work, and so
Mhm.
like how is my body working uh,
Mm.
when I go to the bathroom or.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then something that's, I know it's really awesome that you talked about in your article too, is just, obviously like the sex talk and like really wanting parents or, like you said, mentors, whomever is having this talk with like the girl is like helping them feel empowered and confident, talking about sex, really bringing in like the God aspect, which I really loved. And part of it you talked about was like there's like a physicality part of the sex talk, like penis goes inside vagina, egg, sperm, meat, like just like kind of like bare facts. And then there's like the kind of like pleasure, like the like God-given, like extra exciting part of it, like why people even kind of desire to have sex in the first place.
Mhm.
And I was curious because I feel like, obviously I have young kids. So I've like, we've had that, okay, this is physicality, like, their thing. But I didn't know like when you, or if you even like had an opinion about like, how do you kind of know or judge, like when do we take that from like understanding beyond like physicality, like the gift that sex is from God?
Yeah, this question stumped me, Brittany. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's because the reason it felt stumped was like, oh my gosh, like it is such an important part of how God made us, like that it is such an important thing about sex. So it seems like our culture has done a really good job of like hiding that. Right. And not really, especially in Christian, like, in the church world.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like not wanting it, like pleasure is not a bad thing, right? Like that's God, a huge part of God's creation, right? Especially as a female, like you have your clitoris, which was only designed for pleasure. That's no
Right.
other use. Like the creator of the universe was like, yep, like that's what you need on your body. Like this is a huge important thing. Um, Obviously, like younger kids and things
Right.
probably
Yeah. I'm like, I'm yeah.
yeah, they're probably just not gonna even understand the concept, right, of that at that age. Um, but I mean, even as like as you are starting to experience as like a teenager going through puberty, like sexual arousal and I mean to normalize that, to give space for that, like, oh, like that makes sense because that's how you're created, and like we get to learn how to steward that until we're married. And yeah, like it's just such a big important part of sex, and I don't know if there's like a specific number that I could like throw out, right?
Well, I kind of like what you brought up, just like the idea that like, I mean, it's true, like your body we go through puberty, all of a sudden we're like, whoa, feelings come up that like were never there before,
Yeah,
all this stuff. And so yeah, maybe that is kind of maybe a good like jumping off point of like, I kind of what you said too, like just like not hyping it up, which I feel like the world can do. Like, oh yeah, sex is the best. Like this is like the peak of your life. It's like
right.
being able to do this, but also like, like kind of like you said, kind of just like normalize, like that's from God
Mhm.
and it happens and there's no shame. And it is just part of like, kind of like, I think what I even appreciate how you mentioned, like even a period, like it means your body's working.
Yeah,
Like I just really love like how you like why should we be ashamed that our body is working?
right. Like you're healthy. Yes,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, that's awesome, right? Yeah, we just have to learning to steward those healthy things that our body's doing and figure
Right.
out.
Yeah. And you did, and I know, and whoever, yeah, like Ryan does go into like how to help kids, like real, or not kids, but young adults even realize that they're a way to like how to help them steward feelings of like sexual arousal without having sex. So, which you go into your article a little bit, which I again appreciate because yeah, we need to
That could
also,
be a whole article.
it could be a whole article.
On
I
that. Yeah,
think I actually have had, yeah, a talk with another counselor about that, like how to
I'm
have an
sure.
outlet
Yeah,
that's pure. So yeah. So okay, that was helpful though, how you answered that. I feel like I think what I'm feeling like from what we're talking is like just helping a daughter like not feel alone, like as she's experiencing this, and then not feeling like yeah, just trying to take away as much shame as like possible, just because the world kind of makes it feel like I don't want to talk about this. Like it's
right,
real,
right.
like I think it was your article. It's like 50% of the population experiences this. So
Exactly. Yes.
what final piece of advice would you give to people watching this though?
I think it just overall, it's just better to have some conversation than
Mm,
nothing at all. Like how powerful, even if it's fumbly, it might feel awkward, like that conversation will just be finding ways to connect with your kids is obviously huge. And even when it's
mhm.
silly and awkward or fumbly, or they're not quite sure if you're maybe saying it all right or in the right time or whatever, like that it's still making an impact and is important part of all of it. So yeah, and then just to for parents or for mentors or whoever is like, having these conversations, to just be honest about the nervousness about it. Like, hey, like my parents didn't have this conversation with me. Like, we're
Yeah.
starting something new, like with our family. Like, we're doing this different, and I'm not sure like quite how to do it, but we're gonna go for it, and we can figure it out together. I think that's we get to learn and grow together, even
Mm,
child, and there's a safety in that honesty there, I think.
that's awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for joining us and for like sharing your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
Okay.
And viewers, thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen with us. We love getting to share like the things that are able to be talked about during therapy, and even just like what can be talked about in general with the Christian sex therapist. Like there is nothing that's off topic or too big or too small for to be covered. If you are curious about any other old interviews we've had, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel if you search MyCounselor.Online Christian Counseling. And you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram if you search Love My Counselor. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on MyCounselor.Online.